Thank you for joining us for this look at the best original reporting from KPBS News this week. I'm Amitha Sharma. Coming up, keeping the shelves stocked with Black Friday a week away, we check in on a local toy store dealing with the ongoing supply issues. Caring for San Diego's veterans, the new resource now open in Kearny Mesa, and the work being done to make the VA more welcoming for women who served, and more access to COVID-19 booster vaccines. An update on the local rollout this week. First, the verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse case this week is about more than one case in Wisconsin. It's part of a discussion about America's history and how different groups are treated under the law. San Diego is no exception, even for things as mundane as buying a home. In a special three-part series, KPBS Race and Equity reporter Cristina Kim examines how restrictive covenants shaped who lives in our communities.
Ever since 2014, when Michael Dew bought his home in San Diego's El Cerrito neighborhood, he's been a fixture at his block's parties and happy hours.
Don't allow me to leave this neighborhood. No. Who's gonna smoke the brisket?
But every now and then, something happens that reminds him that as a black man, he didn't always belong. Like the time an older neighbor mistook him as a gardener.
So I'm talking, and I was going to refill a drink. And an older woman, I wish I knew who she was, just kind of caught me off guard. And she says, "So are you one of the gardeners?" And I was like, why would a gardener be at a happy hour?
Years later, when reading over the 1950 deed of his ranch-style home, Dew figured out why his older neighbor might have said such a thing. The deed included a racially restrictive covenant.
That neither said lots nor any portion thereof shall ever be lived upon or occupied by any person other than of the Caucasian race, provided, however, that if persons not of the Caucasian race be kept therein by a Caucasian strictly in the capacity of servants or employees, actually engaged in the services of each occupant or in the care of said premises for said occupant, gardener.
For years, hired help was all he could have been in his home. Racially restrictive covenants were legal documents attached to deeds, subdivisions, and entire developments. They took off at the turn of the 20th century.
Even as early as by 1927, they were on, 3/4 of the new homes in America and about half of all homes. So they spread very quickly and became a dominant way of limiting who could live where.
That's Gene Slater, an affordable housing specialist and author of Freedom to Discriminate. He says real estate brokers and developers created and enforced racially restrictive housing covenants across the nation.
They created a whole system, including all the other brokers in the city and the homeowners association, neighborhood associations, public officials who worked together to make certain a city or a neighborhood would remain all white.
San Diego was at the forefront of this national trend. A sample of San Diego city deeds from 1910 to 1950 found that every single one had a racial restriction. Advertisements for San Diego properties from the early 20th century all allude to these racial restrictions. One from 1910 for lots in Inspiration Heights, which is now part of Mission Hills, says the area has the necessary restrictions and is planned and protected for particular people. In other words, white and affluent. Black, Asian, Latino, and Jewish San Diegans were all but locked out of the city's signature neighborhoods like La Jolla, North Park, and Mission Valley, and instead purposely segregated into southeast neighborhoods. In 1948, the Supreme Court struck down the legality of racially restrictive covenants. But as we see with Dew's home, they continued into the 50s, as did the patterns of racial segregation that they, in concert with redlining, steering, and zoning, created. Patterns that continue to shape San Diego today. It's not hard to see, says Denise Mathis, president of the California Association of Real Estate Brokers.
Whether you're African American, Hispanic, or white, we still use the Interstate 8 as the dividing mark. Okay, so south of the 8, you expect one thing, and north of the 8, you expect something else.
San Diego is more segregated today than it was 30 years ago, according to a recent UC Berkeley study. And much of the segregation is still marked by Interstate 8, with more wealthy, whiter communities in the north. As a Black woman from San Diego, Mathis's own grandfather was impacted by housing discrimination that continued long after racially restrictive covenants became illegal.
I always remember him telling us that he looked at a house right outside of Mission Valley on top of the hill, and he was told he could not purchase there. Okay, so what would that home in Mission Valley be worth that I could have inherited compared to the home that they steered him to buy in Oak Park? Where would my wealth be?
Today, homeownership plays a bigger role in creating wealth for Black families than for white families, but gaps continue to persist. Only 30% of Black San Diegans own their homes, compared to 61% of white people in San Diego, according to a 2018 Redfin study.
There needs to be more evolution of thought as to the impacts of some of the rules and regulations of the past that kind of determine where your socioeconomic position is today.
It's why Michael Dew wants more people to know about racially restrictive covenants like the one in his home. The home his grandfathers, both veterans, couldn't have bought. The overt housing discrimination they faced may have been illegal for decades, but we're still a long way from understanding, let alone undoing, the generational harm these practices have caused. Cristina Kim, KPBS News.
This series by Cristina Kim is part of a collaboration with NPR and our investigative news partner, iNewsSource. It includes the racially restrictive past of one of our most affluent communities in North County, Rancho Santa Fe. You can stream all of it and read more anytime at kpbs.org. A San Diego family is among those suing the state to protect some students with special needs. KPBS education reporter MG Perez explains the case and how it's tied to returning to classrooms during the pandemic.
16-year-old Ethan Russell is a high school sophomore, an avid video game player, a Special Olympics champion, and a musician. He's also living with the extremely rare floating harbor syndrome, a diagnosis that causes him to be medically fragile.
Ethan's had 23 surgeries, 5 heart surgeries, a heart attack. He has cerebral palsy. He's got a lot going on.
Heather Russell is Ethan's mother and strongest advocate. His father, Sean, and younger sister, Talia, are his devoted supporters, too. The Russells are among 15 California families suing the State Department of Education for discrimination by denying Ethan and the other children at-home learning with their full special education support services.
Every parent wants their child to be healthy and happy and have an education. And so he also deserves what every other child is receiving right now.
In July, the state legislature passed AB 130, which became the new law to prioritize in-person learning for all students, including those with special needs. That left students who are medically fragile without a viable distance learning option and support. Ethan has been stuck at home with no support like he used to have his freshman year through Zoom classes. Ethan is a student here at Patrick Henry High School, but he's never actually attended any in-person classes. San Diego Unified School District is not part of the lawsuit, and it is the district's policy to never comment on pending legal action. The families aren't suing school districts, they're suing the state education department because AB 130 is a state law. The department released a statement that says, in part, the CDE is continuing to work overtime on this issue and to ensure that all students receive the education they deserve. As we have stated before, vulnerable students have been acutely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and working to mitigate those impacts has been a top concern of California's education community since the virus was first detected in our state.
It discriminates on the basis of disability. So what we would like is equal access to safe virtual instruction.
Robert Borelli represents the families in this case who were granted a temporary restraining order requiring immediate virtual instruction. That's in process for Ethan and the others. A judge will review the case December 2nd, and the decision could impact children who are medically fragile with special needs across California. That could add the title of hero to this young man's list of accomplishments. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Part of the COVID-19 response now includes booster shots, and that's expected to pick up now that all adults are eligible. This week, KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman stopped by a vaccination site in the South Bay.
I came for my Moderna booster.
Stephen Bridge says he came to get his COVID booster shot at the Chula Vista LiveWell Center because he wants to be as protected as possible.
Well, I'm a retired doctor and a real firm believer in vaccinations, and so I made my own decision.
If you're going to get a booster shot, whether it be at a county site, a pharmacy, or even a healthcare provider, make sure to check to see if you need an appointment ahead of time. And also, officials tell us that they will be checking to make sure it's been at least 6 months since your original doses. Booster shots are now available for anyone in California over the age of 18 with no requirement to have underlying medical conditions or work in a high-risk setting. We talked to a number of people who said they were waiting in this line for their booster shots, but following recent vaccine approval for those ages 5 to 11, there were a lot of kids getting their vaccinations.
I heard they were applying vaccines here, so I gave it a shot to the shot.
And are your kids excited for that, or are they?
No, not at all.
Adrian Delgado lives in Tijuana and brought his 5 and 11-year-old kids here for their first series of vaccinations.
In Mexico, they're still not vaccinating children, only people from 18 or older.
People say getting their booster shot was a fairly painless process.
Very straightforward. Booked the appointment online and then came here. They have a separate line for people with appointments.
The CDC recommends boosters for anyone over 65, those with underlying medical conditions, and those working in high-risk exposure settings. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Access and equity are 2 words to describe the news this week on local veterans care. We have 2 stories, including Alexandra Rangel's look at a new outpatient center. First, here's KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh on efforts to make the VA more welcoming to women.
Captain Jennifer Moreno was 25 years old when the Army nurse was killed in Afghanistan in 2013 while serving with Special Forces. She may become only the 3rd woman to have a VA facility renamed in her honor. Karen Brennan, an Army veteran, chaired a panel to rename the San Diego VA.
The incredible consistency of her character from very early on, it's like she developed her character very early, and she maintained and grew that character throughout.
Moreno grew up in Logan Heights. She didn't come from a military family. The committee interviewed former teachers, family, and her junior ROTC instructor.
She took on challenges. She excelled in what she did, and her dedication to serving others was something that was consistent throughout her life, her very short life.
Roughly 14% of the military are women, but they don't always feel welcome at VA facilities. A VA study recommended a long list of changes, including renaming facilities for female veterans. A bill passed this week would expand maternity services nationwide.
The types of sacrifices and the types of commitment that it takes to do the things that women are doing now deserves that level of exposure. I didn't even know when I left the military. Nobody told me I was even eligible for VA medical care.
Moreno is buried at Fort Rosecrans. She is one of 2 women from San Diego who died in Afghanistan. A bill by Congressman Mike Levin to rename the La Jolla VA passed the House after all 53 members of the California congressional delegation signed on. It awaits a vote in the Senate. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
I served 20 years and I retired.
Elizabeth Robertson is a U.S. Navy veteran. It was her first time at the VA Kearny Mesa Outpatient Center. Although she got lost as she made her way through the big new building, she was amazed to be treated at such a nice facility.
It means a lot to veterans, a bigger place to roam around, check out, or what services we have here.
The $50 million facility is twice the size of the Mission Valley VA clinic it replaces. Robert Smith, a director with the VA San Diego healthcare system, says the clinic will provide service to at least 600 veterans daily.
I think that today represents a continuation of our Veterans Day events and marks an important expansion in our ability to provide world-class care to the veterans that we serve.
Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs says this center will help with detailed care that in the past was overlooked.
We recognize now, in 2021, that the healthcare needs of veterans are so much more complex and different than how they were understood when the VA was first founded.
On top of primary care services like eye care and mental health, veterans will have access to dozens of services.
The building will house more than 30 outpatient services with additions such as dental, dermatology, GI, orthopedics, pain, podiatry, prosthetics, sleep, urology.
The VA San Diego healthcare system serves more than 80,000 veterans in the San Diego and Imperial counties. Alexandra Rangel, KPBS News.
The Salk Institute in La Jolla is getting its biggest single donation ever. Kitty Alvarado tells us more about the $100 million gift from two of San Diego's biggest philanthropists.
It's a big day at the Salk Institute. Philanthropists Joan and Erwin Jacobs are giving the Science and Research Center up to $100 million, making it Salk's largest single donation to date. The Institute's chief science officer says this donation is transformative.
50 years from now, people will look back at this moment and recognize this as a significant moment in our history. This is a long-lasting legacy, and we are eternally grateful.
This will go towards building a $500 million science and technology center that will be named after the Jacobs.
We're just very excited about the plans for the new building, the work that's going to go on in that new building. And so we want to make sure that it will happen and happen fast enough to really make a difference, both to Salk but also to the entire city.
Erwin Jacobs is the founder and former CEO of Qualcomm. As an engineer by trade, science is important to him, and contributing to the center that will benefit many means everything.
But that, of course, is always a motivation for all of us. How can we help many people, most of whom we'll never know, but how can we help them have a more successful, more healthy life? And so supporting the science here is an important aspect of that.
The donation is being made on a matching basis. For every $2 Salk raises, the Jacobs will give $1 up to $100 million, making it a community effort.
I hope it will set an example. For me, that's the most important part of our giving, is that other people will realize that it's an important thing to do and to set an example for them and for our children.
The Institute was founded 60 years ago by the polio pioneer Jonas Salk. Hetzer says this gift means more scientists can work towards curing diseases like cancer and preventing the next illness yet to be discovered. He wants everyone to be a part of that.
Everyone is welcome to join. Whatever they can contribute, it makes a difference. It can fund important projects that drive science further, but also to training of the next generation of scientists.
Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
We had it at the top of this newscast, and it's also among our most read stories this week at kpbs.org. Cristina Kim's series on San Diego's racist history of housing laws continues to gain traction with our online audience. There's also a lot of interest in the potential Kaiser healthcare strike that was averted this week. Same goes for our story on the county program to put shelter cats to work. We'll have that one for you in a bit later. Black Friday is less than a week away, and toys are always a hot item. KPBS reporter John Carroll visited a local shop to see how they're navigating the ongoing supply issues.
The situation with cargo ships waiting off the coast is not getting any better. This week, the Marine Exchange of Southern California reported a record 86 ships waiting for a berth to become available. And what's happening out there directly impacts what's happening here on land, especially when it comes to giving gifts for the holiday season. But we found a happy exception to that here at Geppetto's, where the shelves are fully stocked with plenty of toys and games.
I have 9 stores around San Diego.
Geppetto's owner Brian Miller says all of his stores look like this, brimming with the toys, games, and books little ones will want this year. But with so many retailers reporting problems getting merchandise, how did he do it? One word: preparation. Miller began to see the handwriting on the wall last spring when demand started going up as the pandemic eased.
At that time, supply chain issues really started kicking in. So I tried to beef up our inventory for the holidays because I knew it was coming. Ordered lots, programmed out lots of orders.
But Miller says keeping stores like this one in Seaport Village fully stocked is a constant struggle.
You know, if I order 6 items from a manufacturer, 2 of them are going to come. They're going to come a little late. 2 of them aren't going to come at all because they can't get them. And 2 are maybe going to come. Maybe we'll get them around Christmas. Normally, before all this, I would order and 2 weeks later our products would show up. Or if it didn't show up, the manufacturer could tell me, okay, it's arriving on this date or about this date. All those projections are gone. They don't know what to expect now.
So Miller can't get everything he, or more importantly, his customers want.
If your grandchild wanted the pink version of this dragon, I would find out when we could get it and I'd order it for the customer. But I can't do that this year.
Something else Miller is having trouble getting? Staff. He's got a lot of positions open as we head into this challenging holiday season. John Carroll, KPBS News.
As many of us get ready to prepare a Thanksgiving feast, we're wrapping up National Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week. Melissa May tells us how 2 local organizations are working together to help.
Father Joe's Villages and Mission Fed Credit Union are partnering for Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week.
In this particular week, it's an opportunity for us to be able to bring the community and raise the awareness and suggest how they can get involved in this very critical issue, because food insecurity in our community here and across the nation is very, very severe.
Deacon Jim Vargas is the president and CEO of Father Joe's Villages and describes how much food insecurity affects the San Diego community.
1 out of 3 here in San Diego, 1 out of 3 has some level of nutrition insecurity and across the board. And then 2 children out of 5 have a level of nutrition insecurity.
To kick off the week, the organizations wanted to educate the public about how hunger and homelessness impacts San Diegans. Mission Fed also donated $25,000 as a match challenge to the community to donate to Father Joe's Villages.
There's something happening every single day, from advocacy to activation to donation to education. It's like a lot of alliteration, but all in service and participation of a really important cause.
Neville Villamoria is the Senior VP of Membership, Marketing, and Community Relations at Mission Fed Credit Union. Today, Mission Fed employees donated their time to help assemble about 200 meal boxes for those in need.
They start with all the fresh food that could be perishable, and then they backfill that with everything else that they think would make a well-rounded meal that could drop off for folks.
Along with food insecurity, about 7,600 people experience homelessness every night in San Diego.
The Mahatma Gandhi quote, "Be the change you want to see in the world." Before you can be the change you want to see in the world, you've got to see the change you want to be in the world. And here's our chance to give people a chance to see themselves as supporters of this cause.
To learn more about how you can help during Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, go to my.neighbor.org. Melissa May, KPBS News.
Despite the best efforts of staff, not all cats you see in shelters are best suited for traditional adoption. That's where a new county program comes in. Tanya Thorne shows us how these cats are being put to work in their natural setting.
Most people go to animal shelters looking for a new cat or dog to pet and cuddle. But the San Diego County Department of Animal Services is launching a new program to help cats that are not so affectionate. It's called Working Cats, and the cats do just that, work.
These cats are shy. They're not as social as the cats in our traditional adoption program, but they are excellent mousers. They're more than willing to help patrol your property, your warehouse, your outbuilding, your barn, and make sure that it's pest-free.
Kelly Campbell is the department's director. She says working cats are a great organic pest control option, especially for people living in rural areas of San Diego County.
Where people might have ranches or larger properties or more buildings on their properties, and particularly if we're talking about folks who might have some agricultural or some ranch work that gets done, you've almost certainly got rodents. And so working cats can be a great alternative to things like pesticides or poisons or glue traps. These guys are all natural. They'll keep pollution away, and they keep the poisons out of the environment while controlling the pest problem.
Rainbow resident Douglas Castellum has 4 working cats on his 14-acre property.
Whatever it was that was decimating our garden, gophers, squirrels, whatever,
they're done too. So the cats help control all of that stuff.
Gastelum says his cats have taken care of rodents on his property, and one even killed a rattlesnake. There is concern that working cats are vulnerable to coyotes, but Gastelum says the feral cats are survivors.
We've had our feral for 4 years next month, and he's out every night. And if I were a coyote, I wouldn't mess with them.
He says each cat has a unique personality, and some are friendlier while others keep their distance. But they all fit into the organic practices he wants on his ranch.
The rodents are problems. I mean, they're rodents and they have a right to live, okay. But live somewhere else. And a lot of people poison them. And then you can see we have an owl box right there. And so then if they're poisoned, then the owls eat them or the hawks eat them. And then the owls and the hawks and the other things get poisoned. The cats are a really good solution. That's how we try to do most things out here, is use natural biological solutions.
Campbell says all animal shelters are operating almost at full capacity, so they're waiving adoption fees for working cats. The cats are vaccinated, microchipped, and fully vetted.
Beyond that, they would only need the standard veterinary care or treatment for any injuries that might happen. But other than that, they're pretty easy keepers.
Campbell adds that if taking a working cat home isn't an option, the shelter is always looking for foster families and volunteers. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
We hope you enjoyed this look at KPBS News this week. I'm Amitha Sharma. Thank you for joining us.